Okay, so there is this thing that happens to powerful men that nobody talks about openly. And I know this because I watched it happen to my uncle Bartholomew, and it was one of the most quietly extraordinary things I have ever witnessed up close. My uncle Bartholomew is the kind of man who built everything he has from nothing. And I mean that literally. Started with nothing. Built a life of significant influence and resource through a combination of sharp intelligence and a will that I have genuinely never seen matched in another human being. He is not a hard man. He is not cold. But he is someone who made a decision very early in his adult life that he was going to be the one who determined the direction of things. In business, in relationships, in every arena where direction could be determined, he was going to be the one holding the compass. And for decades he was. He was respected for it, sought out for it. The men in his circle admired the quality. The women who entered his life either accepted it as the terms or did not stay long. And my uncle, while he respected people who were strong in their own right, had never in the 40-something years of his adult life changed his mind about something significant because another person asked him to. He simply was not built that way. Or so everyone who knew him believed. And then he met a woman named Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn did not arrive in my uncle's life with any apparent awareness of his reputation or his history or the pattern that had characterized every relationship he had been in before. She was just herself, completely, in the specific way of a person who has no reason to be anything other than exactly who they are. And she had a quality that I watched my uncle encounter with something that looked almost like disorientation at first. The quality of someone who was not organizing herself around him, not combatively, not with any deliberate effort to establish independence. She just had her own center of gravity, her own direction, her own clear and settled sense of what she valued and what she was moving toward. And she was warm, and she was genuinely interested in him. But her interest was not organized around accommodating his direction. It was organized around its own authentic compass. I watched my uncle at a family dinner about 4 months into his knowing Gwendolyn do something I had never seen him do in my entire life. He changed his mind about something he had publicly declared himself decided about. Not a small thing, a significant thing. A decision about a direction he had announced was settled. And the reason for the change, which he did not announce, but which was completely visible to anyone paying attention, was sitting across the table from him, radiating the specific quality of a woman who had offered him a perspective he had actually never encountered before, because it came from someone whose compass was genuinely equal to his. After dinner, my aunt pulled me aside and said very quietly, "In 40 years, I have never seen him do that. In 40 years. You are that woman in this reading. You are the one. And the cards are going to tell you exactly what that means and exactly why it is as rare as it is. Let us go." Card 1, the Emperor. You met him at his own level A&D. That has never happened before. Ride out. The Emperor lands first, and in a reading about a powerful man changing his mind, this card, as the opener, is spirit being immediately precise about who we are dealing with and what made your impact so unprecedented. The Emperor is not just a man who is successful or accomplished in the ordinary measurable ways. The Emperor is someone whose entire interior architecture is organized around being the authority, around being the one who holds the terms, around being the person in any room whose assessment carries the most weight. Not from arrogance necessarily, from the specific experience of having always been the most capable person in the room in the ways that mattered, and having built an identity around that reality. And the challenge with being the Emperor is that almost everyone who enters his orbit eventually organizes themselves around him. Not because they are weak, because the gravitational pull of that specific quality of authority is genuinely strong. And over time, the Emperor develops a very settled sense of how dynamics work, how people respond to him, what the terms of engagement are. And he stops expecting to be surprised Because nothing surprises him. Because everything confirms what he already knows about himself and his position. And then you walked in. And you did not organize yourself around him, not combatively, not with any performance of independence. You just genuinely had your own emperor energy, your own authority, your own settled sense of what you knew and what you valued and where you stood. And encountering someone who met him at his own level, genuinely met him, not performed meeting him, was something his system had no existing category for. Here is the practical example that makes this so real. There is a man named Harrison, built his company from the ground up over 15 years, deeply respected in his industry, known for a specific quality of decisiveness that people around him found both inspiring and occasionally exhausting, depending on which side of a decision they were on. Every significant woman in his life, before the one this reading is about, had, at some point, deferred to him on things that mattered. Not because they were told to, because the weight of his certainty was such that deferring felt easier than standing in equal ground. And then he encountered a woman named Sylvie. And Sylvie had her own kind of authority that had nothing to do with replicating his. She was an authority in her own domain, clear in her own knowing, settled in her own values. And when Harrison said things that were not accurate in her area of knowing, she simply, pleasantly, and completely without drama said so, not to challenge him. Because accurate information mattered to her, and she offered it as a natural reflex of who she was. Harrison went home after their first significant conversation and told his business partner, "I do not know what to do with her. She did not defer. Not once." And he said it not with frustration, but with something that sounded startlingly close to wonder. That is your emperor card. You met this man at his own level. You had your own compass. You did not defer. And the wonder that produced in him has been the engine of everything that followed, including the mind change that nobody expected from someone everyone believed was not built for mind changes. Card 2, the High Priestess. You knew things he could not access without you. And he felt it. The High Priestess arrives second. And this card is about the specific quality of yours that got under the Emperor's skin in a way that no amount of external achievement or visible power could have. Managed. The High Priestess knows things, not the knowable things, the deeper things, the things that live beneath the surface of what can be analyzed or measured or approached through the kind of intelligence that builds empires. She has access to a layer of reality that the Emperor, for all his capability and authority, cannot reach through his own methods. And when the Emperor encounters the High Priestess, he encounters his own limitation. The specific and humbling reality that there are kinds of knowing that his particular kind of power does not grant access to. And for a man who has built his entire identity around being the most capable person in the room, this is genuinely unprecedented. Because he has met people who are more accomplished in specific areas, more technically skilled in specific domains. But the High Priestess knowing is not technical. It is not domain specific. It is something that lives in the quality of someone's perception, in the depth of their intuition, in their capacity to read what is not being said and know what is not being shown and feel what is not being expressed. And this kind of knowing is not something you can acquire through effort or build through discipline. It is something you are. Practical example for the High Priestess. There is a woman named Octavia. And Octavia had a specific quality that a very powerful man in her life could not stop being fascinated by. She saw things, not psychically, just perceptively. She would be in a conversation and at some point would say something that went so specifically to the center of what was actually happening beneath the surface that it would stop the conversation entirely. The man she was with was someone who prided himself on reading rooms and reading people. He was good at it. It was part of what had made him successful. And Octavia was better, not at his version of it, at something deeper than his version of it. And the experience of being with someone who was better at something he prided himself on, better in a way he could not even fully explain or measure, was simultaneously humbling and electrifying. He told a colleague once she knows things about situations and people before they become knowable. And I have spent significant amounts of time trying to understand how she does it, and I cannot replicate it. And I am not sure I ever will. Cannot replicate it, and not sure he ever will. That is the High Priestess in your reading. You have access to a layer of knowing that this powerful man cannot reach through his own methods. And that knowing is one of the primary reasons he changed his mind. Because you showed him something true that he could not have arrived at without you. And truth from a source he cannot dismiss or replicate or categorize as simply impressive landed differently than anything else has ever landed. Card 3, the star. You gave him something he had been running his whole life without the star drops in third. And this is the card that most surprised me when it came out, because it is not the card I would have expected in a reading about power dynamics. But Spirit put it here for a reason, and the reason is specific and important. The star is hope, the clear, honest, uncomplicated hope that becomes visible when everything obscuring it has been removed. And what Spirit is showing me with this card in this position is that this very powerful man, for all his accomplishment and authority and the life he has built, had been running on something less than hope for a significant portion of his existence. Not despair, not unhappiness exactly, just the specific quality of someone who has organized their entire life around achievement and control and the management of outcomes, and who has somewhere along the way quietly stopped expecting to be genuinely surprised by something good that they did not engineer themselves. Powerful people do this. It is one of the less discussed costs of significant power. When you are the architect of most of what happens in your life, you start to lose the specific quality of openness to receiving something you did not build. And what you lose with that openness is a certain kind of hope, the kind that requires genuine vulnerability to feel, the kind that is not compatible with always being the one who holds the terms. And you gave it back to him, not through anything you deliberately did, through the specific quality of being someone he could not engineer or predict or control. Someone whose value to him was not something he produced, something he received. And receiving something genuinely good that he did not produce himself woke up in him a quality of hope that he had almost forgotten was available to him. Practical example for the star. Think about a man named Alistair, mid-50s, built something genuinely significant, comfortable in every measurable sense, and deeply, privately, in the specific way that very capable people are often deep and private about the things that matter most, lonely for something he could not build himself, for the experience of being genuinely known by someone who was not in his orbit because of what he represented, but because of something more essential about who he was. And then someone showed up who knew him, not his reputation, not his accomplishments. Him, with a quality of seeing that the star represents the clear, uncomplicated, honest seeing that does not have an agenda and does not require anything from what it sees. She just saw him. And the experience of being seen by someone with that quality of vision gave Alistair something he had not felt in a very long time. Something that felt like hope, not hope for a specific outcome. Just the general quality of being alive to possibility in a way he had stopped expecting to feel. He changed his mind about a significant life decision after knowing this person for 6 months. And when his closest friend asked him why he changed his mind after being so certain, he said, because she showed me something I had stopped believing was available. And I am not willing to organize my life around the old belief now that I know the new one is true. That is your star. You gave this man back something he had stopped believing was available. And the mind change was the direct result of someone who has spent decades deciding things based on what he believed to be true, updating his beliefs based on what you showed him. Card 4, the world. He has arrived at an understanding of you that is complete and permanent. The world arrives forth. And as this card settles into the reading, I feel something very settled and very definitive about what it is saying. Because the world is completion, not the completion of something ending, the completion of a full understanding being arrived at. The moment when someone has processed enough, and observed enough, and felt enough, that what they know has achieved a quality of wholeness, of having the full picture rather than a partial one. And what this man has arrived at after the encounter with your emperor energy that met his, after the high priestess knowing that he could not replicate, after the star hope that you gave back to him, is a complete understanding of what you are, not a partial reading, not a surface assessment, the full picture. And the full picture has produced in him something that the world card describes as a kind of arrival. He is at the end of the processing phase and at the beginning of the knowing phase. He knows what you are. He knows what you mean. He knows what the mind change was actually about. And that knowing is permanent. Practical example for the world. There is a woman named Leonora, and the powerful man in her life had been in a kind of extended assessment phase for the first several months of knowing her. Not because she was unclear, because what she was took time to fully arrive at. He was someone who had always trusted his initial assessments, because his initial assessments were usually accurate. And with Leonora, his initial assessment kept having to be expanded, kept needing to be revised upward, kept revealing additional layers that his first reading had not accounted for. And at some point, the expanding and the revising reached completion. The world card turned, and he arrived at the full picture. And the full picture was so significantly different from any picture he had formed of any person he had encountered before that it required an entirely new category in his internal taxonomy. She was not impressive in the ways he had previously used to measure impressive. She was rare, and rare required its own category. He said to a trusted friend, "I have spent my whole life being confident in my assessments. And this is the first time I have understood that my initial assessment was not wrong exactly. It was just too small for what I was actually looking at. Too small for what he was actually looking at. That is the world. His understanding of you has expanded to its full and complete size. And the full and complete size of it is something he has no prior reference point for. Because you are in a category that did not exist in his taxonomy before you created it. Card 5, the sun, your rarity, is now visible to everyone around him, and they are watching him respond to it. The sun arrives 5th, and this card is doing something very specific in your reading. Because the sun is visibility. Undeniable public visibility. The kind of light that cannot be hidden or managed or kept private, because it shines on everything in its vicinity, whether anyone is ready for the illumination or not. And what the sun is illuminating in your reading is not just what this man feels privately. It is the visibility of that feeling. The fact that the people around him, his closest circle, the people who know him best and have known him longest, are watching him respond to you in ways that are unprecedented and completely visible to anyone who knows what his baseline looks like. The mind change did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in front of witnesses. And the witnesses are sitting with the specific experience of watching someone they thought they had fully understood do something they did not believe he was capable of doing. Here is the example for the sun. There is a man named Conrad, and Conrad's business partner of 12 years watched him over the course of about 8 months change in specific and observable ways, not dramatically. Not in ways that would be visible to a stranger, but to someone who had 12 years of Conrad's baseline to measure against. The changes were significant. The specific rigidity that had always characterized his decision-making became slightly more flexible. The specific quality of listening he brought to conversations became deeper. And most notably, the specific certainty he had always carried about certain things became something more nuanced, more open, more willing to hold what he thought he knew loosely enough to let new information in. The partner asked him about it eventually, not accusatorially, with genuine curiosity. And Conrad said something that his partner later told me was the most unexpected sentence he had heard from Conrad in 12 years of partnership. He said, "There is someone in my life who has made me understand that my certainty has sometimes been the ceiling rather than the foundation. And I am interested in what is above the ceiling." Interested in what is above the ceiling. That is your sun card. Your rarity has become visible, not just to him, to everyone around him. And what they are watching is a man who has always been the ceiling, exploring the possibility of sky. What Spirit wants you to know about your rarity? 4 final things that Spirit is insisting I deliver before this closes. The first, the rarity that Spirit is pointing to in this reading is not about you being superior to other women or better than other people who have been in this man's life. It is about you being specifically yourself in a way that is genuinely uncommon. The world contains many impressive people, many capable people, many attractive and interesting and accomplished people. What is genuinely rare is someone who is completely and authentically themselves without any apparent need for the external confirmation of that self, without any apparent awareness of the effect their selfhood has on others, without any calculation in the being. You are that person. And that specific quality of uncalculated, authentic selfhood is what changed the mind of someone who had stopped expecting to be changed. The second, the mind change is not fragile. This is important because powerful men who change their minds sometimes change them back when the vulnerability of the change becomes uncomfortable. Spirit is saying this change has a quality of permanence to it that the others did not, because it was not produced by something external. It was not produced by an argument or a demonstration or a performance of any kind. It was produced by the consistent encounter with who you actually are. And who you actually are is not something that goes away when circumstances shift. The foundation of the change is solid because the thing that produced it is permanent. The third, carry this reading as information rather than as pressure. Knowing that you are rare and that you produced something unprecedented in a powerful man could become something that makes you self-conscious about the very naturalness that produced it in the first place. Do not let it. The way to honor what Spirit is showing you today is not to try harder to be what you already are. It is to continue being it without effort, without performance, without any awareness of the effect. Because the effect was always the product of the not trying. The moment you start trying to be the rare thing, you will stop being it. Just continue being you, exactly and completely and without apology. The fourth and final. The title of this reading calls you rare, and it calls you crowned for a reason. Not because you won something, because you arrived somewhere. You arrived at a place in your own development, in your own relationship with yourself, and your own values, and your own knowing that produced the specific quality that changed an unchangeable man. And that arrival is not something that can be taken from you. Not by his subsequent behavior. Not by how this situation unfolds. Not by anything external. You arrived somewhere real inside yourself. And the crown is not his acknowledgement of you. It was always yours. His acknowledgement is just the latest confirmation of something that was true before he saw it and will be true regardless of what he does with what he now knows. I want to come back to Gwendolyn one final time because 6 months after that dinner where my uncle Bartholomew changed his mind in front of family witnesses for the first time in 40 years, I had a conversation with her that I have never forgotten. I asked her what she thought had produced the change, what she thought she had done that 40 years of people before her had not managed. She looked at me for a moment with this very calm quality about her, and then she said, I did not do anything differently than I would have done with anyone. I just did not organize myself around him. I had my own compass, and I followed it. And I think he had just never met someone whose compass was actually theirs before. Someone whose compass was actually theirs. That is the whole reading. That is the entire thing. You had a compass that was actually yours, not borrowed from what he expected or calibrated to what he wanted or adjusted to what seemed safe. Yours, genuinely and completely, and without effort yours. And in a life filled with people who eventually organize their compass around his, encountering someone with a real one of their own was the most disorienting and the most significant thing that has ever happened to him. He changed his mind because of your compass, not because you argued better or performed more impressively or did anything strategically correct, because your compass was real. And real compasses do not defer to other compasses just because the other compass is larger or louder or has been followed by more people. Real compasses simply point true north, and yours did. And in pointing true north, you showed him a direction he had never been shown before. That direction changed him permanently, in the specific and irreversible way that genuine encounters with genuinely rare people always do. You are rare. You have always been rare. And now he knows it. And the knowing has changed the man that nobody expected to be changed. Wear the crown. You earned it by simply being exactly who you are. Drop something in the comments if this reading found you today. Tell me what landed. Subscribe for the next reading. And share this with the woman in your life who needs to hear that her realness, her genuine, uncalculated, authentic selfhood, is the most powerful thing she carries.